Wow, what a great movie. Great movie? Great movie? This movie was incredible! The best sequel to ever sequel. The visuals, the parallels, the differences, the characters, the humor, the atmosphere, the color theory, the story, the value as a sequel, the subtle references and hints in the backgrounds, the connections, the upgrades, the background characters, the revelations, the unanswered mysteries, the chemistry, the focus, the action, the poses, the composition and trippy layouts, the arcs and the drive, the insecurity beneath the push-through confidence, the fake-outs that not only fool the characters but also the audience, the callbacks, the untraditional and simplistic villain, the music, a good portion of the dialogue, the credits, the hype that is to come. Legit. This is the first movie I ever planned to see 5 times over. I don't typically go to a movie more than twice, but this one is special. So I made a list with a friend, 5 reasons to see Across the Spider-Verse 5 times. Number 1, for the first watch. Number 2, for all the things you missed. Number 3, watch in subtitles to understand what everyone is saying. Number 4, for the hell of it. And number 5, to study Miguel O'Hara's ass. Because the designer on Twitter claimed they had to tone it down, and I was really looking, man. There isn't much there apart from one scene, but hey, that's not stopping Twitter. Stay off that, by the way. Anyway, since making this review, I've so far seen the movie 3 times. Excited to see it for the other 2. 9.5 out of 10 from me, boys. Okay, so, major spoilers for the rest of the video. Let's dive in. This movie was, overall, a great sequel premise. We have a passage of time, but it's not too much to the point where we can't fill in any gaps. Mila and the others have improved their abilities, so they're more powerful now. Some characters have also fulfilled their arcs and developed since we last saw them. We get references and exposition for the previous movie, so newcomers aren't lost. The plot is a direct consequence and continuation of what happened in the last movie. We see new perspectives from both old and new characters and how they've been affected through the previous plot and how it's all connected to Miles. All the new characters introduced fit the narrative and are written really well, bouncing off the others with great chemistry. It's a really, really good sequel. Everything you could have wanted for a continuation of the Spider-Verse. So the movie starts off from Gwen's point of view, which is an interesting tactic. We see her life before she met Miles. We see her relationships and we see her struggle. We also see her after she met Miles, where residual dimensional anomalies have leaked out into her world. We get a fight scene where she brilliantly saves civilians, setting up her competence as a hero. She meets Miguel and an alternate Spider-Woman, introducing her and the audience to what is essentially the Spider-Verse police force. We also get a scene of her dad catching her and threatening to arrest her, a reason to really leave behind her world to join the Spider-Verse. This really, really helped the pacing, because right after, we have Miles having a short meeting with a new villain, but otherwise, a good portion of the next sequence is him sitting around or talking with his parents. And then suddenly he would see Gwen again and she would just quickly explain everything to him as they swing about like they did in all the trailers. It's good they did the reverse. It helped the show don't tell rule. It would have been really slow if we started off with Miles. That being said though, there are points in this film where the pacing is too fast. Like when Hobie shows up, he busts through a barrier with an electric guitar, Miles is introduced to him, Gwen and Pav know him, Gwen borrows Hobie's sweater and his shoes, all the while they're fighting Spot who is trying to hop to another dimension. It's a sudden influx of overwhelming information layered over heavy accents and cultural lingo, some of which is translated on screen, but only for 2 seconds before you can truly even read it. I had a difficult time understanding what was happening in that scene on the first watch. There was probably another scene or two where the characters were talking too fast, establishing a lot while also kind of mumbling lines. So these scenes are why I'd recommend a second watch on top of subtitles. Gwen also has more personality in this movie. However, some of her personality change felt off at certain times. We start off with her being really angsty, stuck in her own world, avoiding everything and everyone, and being particularly nasty to her band. And then we turn around when she's Spider-Woman and suddenly she's making jokes, lowering her voice around her dad, and teasing him about the manhunt for her. She asks Jess to adopt her, jokes about Miguel being the Blue Panther and being quirky and silly around him. Like, yeah, she's got a mask on and can be perceived as a different person outside of her civilian self, but otherwise it's really awkward to go from, oh, I'm never gonna see Miles again, my friend is dead, my dad wants me arrested, and my band hates me and I quit, to ha 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 funny jokes during crime fighting time. I mean, even later there's one moment she's happy Miles beat Miguel and escaped, and the next she's yelling at Miguel for not being hard enough on him. It seems like a flip-flop. As nice as it is to see more to her character, at the same time, I can't help but feel some of this is actually out of character for her. There's some moments where this quirky personality works, though, excusing herself talking to Miles' parents because she didn't get her steps in. She steals Hobie's shoes. When she's investigating Spot's apartment, she and Miles sync up, exclaiming, "Shoot!" in distress as a villain becomes successful in his endeavors to make a dimensional portal. I mean, she seems sillier, but also a bit more angsty than she was in the last movie. I mean, a nice touch-up to her personality, albeit inconsistent at times. I don't know. Either way, glad she got more of a spotlight. I love that Hobie Brown is first introduced as a potential rival to Miles. Like, Gwen's been staying at his place, she borrows his clothing, he's good friends with Pav, he smashes right through the barrier that Miles is struggling to get through. Miles seems rather jealous of him, but Hobie is the one instructing him to use his palms to channel his power, not just his fingers. And later when Miles is trapped, everyone arguing around him, seemingly betraying him, Hobie is the one who holds up his hands. Hobie is the one Miles turns to, and he sees him with his hands up, and he whispers, "Palms." He's holding up his palms, instructing Miles how to bust out like he did before. He gets him to focus. When the world was against Miles, he alone helped him, even when they didn't even know each other that well. When Miles turns against Miguel and the others, Hobie smirks and quits. We see him snatching pieces of the facility, which he turns into his own portal device, which he later delivers to all of Miles' friends. He becomes Miles' greatest ally, and I love that. He's a silly, but cool rebel who goes against corrupt establishments. He loves that Miles defies them. He's got such an overall great dynamic with the others. Pavitr Prabhakar. Hard to pronounce name. I hope I didn't butcher that. Pav is also another great foil setup. Constantly calling Miles the new guy, he goes on about how his life is so easy. He's fit, he's got great hair, he's got a girlfriend, he loves his aunt, he tries hard in school, he feeds the neighborhood dogs. He's got such a perfect life that anyone would be jealous of him. He also picks up on Miles' crush on Gwen and is excited over their relationship drama. He's also ignorant with how successful he's been in his dimension, that when Spot escapes through his dimensional machine, he's like, "Looks like it's another easy day for Spider-Man," while the others try to shut him up to not jinx it. When the time comes, when his girlfriend and his girlfriend's father are put in jeopardy, he spouts the same thing Miles did earlier. I can do both, but he can't. He can't get to his girlfriend's father. Miles, on the other hand, sees the danger and immediately rushes in, risking his life to save the police chief and kid, and successfully does so, preventing Pav's cannon event, and Pav graciously thanks him. Miles preserved Pav's innocence. He preserved his family. He saved Pav himself from heartbreak and turmoil. The weight of this one action is so important. But then this canon event ends up allegedly unraveling Pav's dimension, putting everyone at risk. I'll get back to this later, but even so, Miles earned a spot in Pav's heart. On top of the fact they correlate so well in battle, the chemistry between these characters is so well set up. It's truly going to be great to see them all interact in part 2. Although a background character, Margo is Spiderbyte, a girl projecting herself through a VR headset at home. She didn't get a lot of screen time, but we have some fun insights into her character. Both she and Miles seem to sense something about each other at first, unless it was just, oh, she's cute, he's cute, I don't really know. She's sarcastic, she avoids her fighting parents at home by being Spiderbyte elsewhere. When Miles is being sent off to what they all believe to be his home dimension, she has the option to stop him, but she doesn't. She barely knows Miles, and yet she trusts her gut and lets him go. Another great friend that has Miles' back in his time of need. I hope we see more of her in part 2. We see Penny at some point, and Ham and Noir at the end. A lot of people noticed how devastated and tired Penny looks in this movie, but they never give an explanation as to why. Her robot also looks quite different. I found a Wikipedia page and it says that she loses her Aunt May. Another suit owned by a girl named Addie ends up consuming both Penny's aunt and Addie, so these deaths might be the canon events that wrecked Penny. I'm so glad the original gang is back, and I'm excited to see them in part 2. However, I am worried about how they're gonna juggle all these characters. We've been establishing the current characters, Pav, Gwen, Miles, Spiderbyte, and Hobie. They've all got great chemistry. I dare say way better chemistry than what he had with the original Spidergang. Penny, Noir, and Ham haven't really interacted or supported Miles at all to the level that our current characters have. So we're gonna need these three to interact with the others and maybe Miles a bit more if they intend to really have them be part of this team rather than just background characters there merely for reference. Hey, Peter's back! With the kid! She's cute! I'm happy for him! But maybe don't bring your baby to fights! The one thing your wife asked you not to do! Mayday seems like she's having fun. Gonna be a little rebel superhero in her future. Seems like she also inherited spider powers from her father. Just hope Peter stays away from the big action to keep her safe. Jessica Drew is a super cool character, giving Gwen her own mentor and or mother figure. She's got a cool design and motorcycle, though, let's address the elephant in the room. Jessica Drew from the original comics does indeed have a storyline where she's pregnant. I don't know anything beyond that or how involved she is in fighting, but Jessica, it feels like Peter bringing his daughter along to fights. What are you two doing? Does the Spiderverse facility not have paternal leave? No maternal leave? They don't even have maternal leave. Can Miguel not have her be his backup in fights when she's in what appears to be her second trimester? Let her run missions with Spiderbyte or something, just for a few months. You're jeopardizing both your health and the baby's. What are you two thinking? So Miguel was a tease character in the bonus credits scene of the previous movie. Back then he was way slimmer and seemed less like a stick in the mud. Lila, his computer AI, I think, initially reported the massive dimensional cannon breach to him prior to his watch prototype being completed. Lila claims despite the initial damage, the universe didn't implode in on itself. But now, in this movie, they're acting like that's not the case. That the universe very much did implode in on itself. That whatever happened truly affected everyone in a terrible way, and Miguel has been allegedly cleaning it all up ever since. In this movie, Miguel is darker, far more buff, and seethes with hatred. Now, there is a possibility that Lila claimed the universe didn't implode only to find out later it was in fact becoming damaged as a result of the collider, which he later had to deal with. At this point, he probably started to form the Spider Society, and midway through that, while recruiting, he found that dimension where he died, where he was happy and had a daughter. Peter B. Parker was there with him when he lost it all, so the timeline is a bit confusing at first, but if you connect the dots, it could still work. Now, when Gwen first introduced him as a ninja vampire Spider-Man, imagine my immense disappointment when I found out he is not, in fact, a vampire. He's even got the fangs and went to bite one of the anomalies early on in the movie, and I was shocked. I was like, is he gonna drink this guy's blood? Is he gonna tear out his throat? Wouldn't that kill him and only cause more damage to this dimension? But no. Apparently Miguel is just a man spider, half DNA from each, who has paralyzing venom in his fangs. So if he bites someone, they just suffer paralysis. Low-key disappointed. Also surprised he didn't try to bite into Miles' shoulder while he had him down to capture him again. I feel like that was the most logistical tactic in that situation, but whatever. Can't have Miles kidnapped so early in the story, I guess. Miguel antagonizes Miles, constantly berating him, treating him like a child. He's so angry and upset that Miles doesn't understand what's at stake. He screams at him. He's the one who puts everything back together after it's been destroyed by Miles' dimension. Miles is the catalyst of the Spiderverse unraveling. Miles is not happy when he's told he has to let his father die, and Miguel knows. He understands. He's been through this. He's been in the same position as Miles, so a lot of his anger is projection. He's taking it out on him. But there is a moment where Miles says, "You can't ask me to not save my father." And Miguel looks at him sad but understanding. He says, "I'm not asking," because he knows he could never ask that of him. He couldn't, so he locks him up in a cage, for his own good. And when Miles continues to flee, when Miles continues to best his men that he's spent ages accumulating to assist in the preservation of the multiverse as they know it, when Miles continues to defy him, when Miguel has suffered, when Miguel thinks he knows better, well, he just gets angrier. He didn't want Miles to be a part of this. He didn't want anything else to collapse, but the kid slips through his fingers and it makes a mockery of him. Is he a tragic hero or is he a villain? I'm so curious how they're going to handle him in part 2. I am so glad the trailers didn't reveal too much about this movie. The Spot at first is a quirky, silly villain of the week, but he continues to insist on being Miles' arch nemesis. He was the one who worked at that Collider facility in the previous movie, and he was in the room when the Collider exploded. It turned him into a strange monster who couldn't hold a job. His coworkers and family won't talk to him anymore. But the thing is, all the people that worked at that corporation knew they were working for a villain. They valued security, loyalty, and their work. They had their own guns ready to attack Spider-Man, so make no mistake, these aren't your everyday workers. This guy wanted to be a villain. He wants to be somebody. He wants to be acknowledged. He wants to explore and create. He wants to control and destroy, even though he's an everyday dude. Just as anyone can become Spider-Man, anyone can become the Spot. Well, not unless you're a genius robotics scientist or physicist, but that's neither here nor there. It slowly creeps in that this guy means serious business. We are talking wide scale. The fate of the multiverse is at stake. He's still not the main focus, ironically. We spend more time with Miguel fighting Miles than anything, and we've got another potential villain on Miles' plate, so despite Spot's power, he's still not really acknowledged overall. Poor dude can never get his big break, huh? He's still just not as interesting as the other villain plots at hand. Speaking of Miles, he is excellent in this film. A wonderful protagonist. He clearly appreciates and cares about his parents, but he's unable to show it. Him hiding his Spider-Man persona has caused a rift between them, and he's too afraid to risk revealing it yet. He's stretched thin enough as it is, leading a double life, but he's getting good at his powers. He grew up a bit. He commands his chameleon abilities at will and is even learning how to absorb energy to expel it outward again. Despite his talent for the arts, he's actually studying for interdimensional travel. He misses Gwen and Peter and the others so much that he's willing to spend his lifelong career to reach them again. But knowing they already had a way to visit him for quite some time now, in fact, but didn't come see him, that must have hurt more than anything. The sense of betrayal weighs him down, but he's not as angry as he can be, because despite being deliberately told not to, Gwen visits him. Despite their disagreements, Peter confesses he had Mayday because of him. Miles changed their lives. He's still important to them, but not enough to really take his side. The simultaneous support he receives in this movie, aside from the betrayals that leave him feeling alone, it's an interesting dynamic. It's an interesting irony. Miles hears Miguel's harsh words echo in his mind. He feels like a scared animal, confused and running for his life, feeling insecure about his position as Spider-Man, but regardless, he pushes through. He stands up for himself. Even in the wake of hopelessness, he comes out steadfast, and I adore that about Miles. There's so many protagonists out there that collapse into a tearful pity party, sort of like he did in the previous film, but he's learned. He's powerful now. He's not gonna let that stop him. Spider-Man or not, Miles Morales always gets back up. And when we encounter villain Prowler Miles, ooh, the shock on his face, the pleading, the uncaring standoffish personality of his alternate other who sets his gauntlet against the side of Miles' face in a threatening manner, staring him down while Miles is desperately trying to get a spark into his hands to escape. I am so intrigued. Dimension 42 Spider is implied to have been intended for its own Miles. I have no idea where they're going with this Miles in part 2, but I am down for it. That being said, Miles is working with his father on the side of justice in his dimension, but in this one, he's working as a villain with his uncle. I'm someone who knows next to no comic lore here. Miles mentions at the beginning of this film that his father and uncle started a business when they were younger. His dad gets awkward about it, and then brushes it off, changing the subject after his wife gives him a look. Something happened between those two brothers, enough that Miles' dad avoids speaking to him unless absolutely necessary. Seems like this business wasn't anything good, and Miles doesn't seem aware of it. Now that he can talk to Uncle Aaron again to get his side of the story, I hope in part 2 he finally finds out. I think it'll even out the playing field if, or when, he reveals his own secret to his true parents back in his home dimension. The color theory, while usually really, really good, was actually a little inconsistent for this movie, or sometimes overdone. There were really only 2 specific characters that had this issue. Gwen's world has great pastel colors, but when she was upset, it changed to a muddy, deep blue-green. She herself would change color when she's speaking with her dad. You know, the walls start dripping paint as if the room itself is crying. That's wonderful. And when she hugs her dad, it's a blinding pure white. The color's really great. The abstract artistic design happening in the background, it's great, but it happens with every shot cut. You don't really see it coming. It doesn't always bleed into the next shot. It's a bit distracting. It feels as though we've cut to a different scene, but it's really the same one. And then Hobie Brown was the most inconsistent, though. When he shows up in his Spider-Man costume, he's clearly red and blue. His color is a bit wacky because he's stylized with colorful lines, but when he takes off his mask, his color gets sucked away into a muddy Instagram Sutro filter. But then later on, when he's seen stealing things from the Spiderverse facility, his color changes to a wacky pop art color scheme, and then less than 10 minutes later, suddenly his color is back to that of 3D models like everyone else. When Hobie's jamming out on his guitar, the frames change color to emphasize his chord tugs, the power rating off his guitar. It helps push the action. But when he's idle, the color still pops, and it doesn't have as good of an effect. The most distracting was when he's casually walking through the Spider-Man facility grayed out with an orange jacket. All his keyframes are at different offsets too, so he stands out the most even when that particular shot isn't supposed to be focused on him. So again, a majority of it works, but a few scenes didn't. Needs subtitles. I would highly recommend watching this movie with subtitles if you can find some. They had subtitles for a line of Spanish or 2 in the first movie, but they had none in this one. Sadly, soy español es mal. I could only understand a little. I'm really, really rusty. We also have 2 new Spider-Men with thick accents. Hobie even had slang that would sometimes be translated on screen, but it would last for a second and then whiz away before you could finish reading it. And the music was really loud. I couldn't hear what the characters were saying. I don't know if this was a theater issue or not, but I recommend subtitles if you have access to them, because you're gonna need it. The music wasn't as memorable as the first film, but upon second watch, I can confirm the soundtrack is pretty baller. I love Indian Teamwork, Self-Love is Nice, Annihilate, Falling Apart, and The Anomaly are so chilling. Definitely buying the soundtrack and art book ASAP. The comedy in this movie was, majority speaking, great. There was a kid licking the glass window of a train and Miles scolds him for it. They brought back the, I think it's a Banksy guy as a running gag. I laughed, but later realized it doesn't fit as well as it did the last movie because this guy almost got killed. There was a giant Birdman attacking several Spider-Man, and a giant helicopter almost crashed and killed a dozen or so people. It's very clearly not a Banksy. In the previous movie, they did the Spider-Man point meme at the end, and they did it again in this one, but this time around it worked. It wasn't forced. It had a legitimate meaning in the story. Catch Spider-Man when there are dozens. They had a lot of references, some of which I understood, some of which I didn't, since I'm not keeping up with the Marvel or Sony multiverse movies anymore. But the ones I did get, like the reference to Doctor Strange and the other Spider-Man, was pretty funny with how Miguel referred to them. At some point, a construction worker tells the Spot to stop talking about his holes. It's making everyone uncomfortable. I was surprised at the small amount of adult content they snuck into this movie. Miguel refers to Lego Spider-Man as one of their best, which is really funny and oddly adorable. The only thing that wasn't funny is the chai tea bit you see in every trailer for this film. It's overdone. He's just saying tea twice. It's masala chai, spiced tea. It's a Western misconception, that's it. Pavitr is acting like he just said a slur. It's not that bad. But yeah, a good amount of jokes landed and helped diffuse the tension as intended. The Ruse. Ooh. We can't not talk about the Ruse. When Miles sets up the go-home machine, Miguel is desperate to stop him. Spiderbyte has the opportunity to, but doesn't, and Miles is sent home. He just ran miles, fighting off thousands of Spider-Men. He endured hateful comments and rough beatings to get home, and yet he knows he could still be chased. He knows he needs to get home as soon as possible to save his father. He's running through his city, hallucinating through stress. He hears Miguel's words echo in his head. You were never supposed to be Spider-Man. It's your fault your Spider-Man died. You're the original anomaly. You don't belong here. And he's running. He's so stuck in his own head. He's afraid and upset and betrayed, but he pushed through. Miguel and the others are tailing him. They teleported to his world. They're setting up and holding position to capture him. Gwen distracts one of the Spider-Men in the alleyway, chucking him away so Miles can sneak back into his home through the window, and then Gwen goes up after him, waiting outside. Miles collapses. He can't quite believe he made it, and then his mom comes in. He says he did what she said. He took care of himself. He didn't let them stop him. He said he's not afraid anymore, that he believes in himself after going through all those Spider-Men on his own. And Miles finally makes the decision to reveal his secret identity to his mother. And then she's like, "Who?" I and many other people laughed aloud in the theater, but as their conversation continued, you feel the unease setting in. Something is very, very wrong. Gwen goes into his room, and there's no one there. And then Miles glitches, and he, along with the audience, realize he's in the wrong dimension. This is an excellent setup. There were so many clues that something was wrong. From the start, the dimension that was scanned from his DNA was 42, that of where his spider originated. His mom becomes distressed when Miles says he wished his dad were here to explain things to her. Gwen was waiting outside his room, but it's framed as though she's listening in on the conversation when in reality she was waiting. She was waiting for him to come in, waiting for him to make noise, any indication that he was there. She was waiting to come in at the right moment, but he never shows. Not only did the writers fool the audience, but they also fooled the characters themselves. It's brilliant storytelling. They know just how much to show and when. They know just how much to leave out. And it's wonderful. When Miles glitches and that creepy whistle sinks in from the soundtrack, you see the horror on his face, you feel it. You're right there with him. Even when he sees his Uncle Aaron again, and he's knocked out cold and tied up, he's still convinced his uncle is the Prowler, completely forgetting his uncle wasn't the one to knock him out earlier. So when we get a second reveal of Dimension 42 Miles, an evil Prowler version that's got him tied up and at the mercy of his gauntlets, ending on a cliffhanger? Peak cinema. Peak cinema. So I've mentioned some things thus far that stood out to me in the film, but honestly I didn't notice any of that until later when I'd let it marinate in my head. The only issue I really have with this movie is the ridiculous amount of parenthood topics. This movie is 2.5 hours long, and we have half a dozen scenes about the parents and how they're struggling to raise their kids. It got really odd. First scene, Spider-Woman is pregnant. She rides a motorcycle helmetless while fighting evildoers, while carrying a child. Apparently this is a thing in the comics. It was controversial then too. And same with Peter. According to his wife, he brings baby Mayday along with him while he's fighting villains. Like yeah, she's got your spider powers, but she's a dang baby. Peter having a kid makes sense for his character arc from the last movie, but for Jess, is this just a quirky character design? Like, is there a point to her being pregnant in this film? Or is this just a reference to her original storyline? Then Gwen's dad betrays her, she wants Spider-Woman to adopt her, kind of becomes her protege. Miles and his parents are discussing his future and how they're all at odds with his decisions. Miles, as Spider-Man, talks with his dad info dumps about not knowing what to do about his son. His mom and dad again talking amongst their family on the roof about Miles, then grounding him. Then his mom sneaks up on him when speaking to whom they assume to be his girlfriend, and his mom says Miles has to take care of himself like she did for him all these years. Peter talks about not knowing if he's a good parent. Miles' parents talking about not knowing if they're good parents. Gwen and her dad again about acceptance or whatnot. Like, why is this the theme of the movie? Like, yeah, they change it up enough not to be total repeats of the previous scenes. They've changed enough dialogue or circumstances, but the sheer amount of parenthood themes is excessive. Like, I get the ending reveals Miles' dad is dead and maybe he should appreciate him more or something, but like, Miles is just at odds with his parents because they don't understand his career goals. They don't understand his friends or his need for privacy. It all comes down to him being Spider-Man. That's it. Any issues they have would resolve if or when he tells them. It's really not that deep. They could have deleted some of these parenthood scenes. Kind of feels like this movie didn't need to be as long as it was. Okay. Buckle up. We have a lot to discuss about the Spiderverse theories. So Miguel claims that a multiverse is made, and within that multiverse exists a web of interconnecting universes called the Spiderverse. It's what connects all the spider people together. He then claims that things that hold these individual universes together are things called the canon. We all know what this means, very meta, very meta. But the canon events confuse me. Miguel claims that each spider person is connected through these canon events. He claims, as a spider person, it's almost a universal rule that you have an aunt or uncle die, like anyone close to you, or even like a police chief. I don't know every single piece of lore out there, but the character death isn't always concise. Penny's dad died. Gwen's friend died. Out of all of the infinite universes, surely there are spider people out there that haven't lost anyone. How do you know what is canon and what isn't? They can even predict when a canon event is about to occur. Do they even know for sure who is meant to die every time? Or is it like a weird energy spike that indicates something significant is going to happen in that dimension? When they bring up canon events, Hobie in particular looks like he has a canon event about giving up being Spider-Man. Did that actually happen, or is that something yet to happen? I feel like we're getting into prophecy territory here now. Can they see the future? This is not a well-explained situation. I mean, even Gwen's father, a police chief close to Spider-Man, is supposed to die. But then Gwen's dad quits. He's no longer police chief. He's no longer going to die. Her universe hasn't imploded. Why the heck not? That's a canon event that arguably Miguel and Jess prevented by removing her from the timeline right before her dad arrests her. Why is this loophole allowed? Does it have to be a police chief? Is another police chief gonna randomly die in his place? Like, what the hell? Even Pavitr, his girlfriend's father is about to die. Like, yeah, that's a canon event, but the canon event is caused by something that isn't canon. The Spot, who is an anomaly, invades his world and is causing all the destruction. How can a canon event happen from something that isn't canon? The cause and effects don't line up here. That being said, Miguel claims that Miles is an anomaly. Anomalies are people sent to other dimensions, or things happen to them in said dimension that weren't supposed to happen. Miles was not supposed to be bitten by a spider. The original Spider-Man wasn't supposed to die. I love the prospect that Miles is unique, that he's not meant to be Spider-Man, that he pushes past this and does his own thing, he fights back, like, that's wonderful. However, I am very, very confused around this whole anomaly situation. So when Miles saves Pavitr's girlfriend's police chief father, a black hole appears and starts sucking in buildings of this world. Miguel sends in a task force to contain the collapse. Miguel proceeds to explain that if a canon event is disrupted, disrupted, then the universe implodes in on itself. Miguel is projecting his hatred and frustration onto Miles because he was responsible for the destruction of a universe precious to him. Another him died in another universe and he replaced him. And because he did that, everything collapsed around him. People were disappearing. Somehow Peter B. Parker is there to witness this. There is a lot to unpack here. First off, Miguel's dimension collapse shows people in other buildings disappearing. They're glitching out and then being deleted. We see no black hole consuming anything. Miguel claims Miles' actions are doing the same thing to Pavitr's dimension, but so far, it's only one building falling into, lo and behold, a black hole that does not appear in Miguel's flashback. If anything, that is the Spot's hole. That is very clearly one of the Spot's dimensional holes. And Miles counterclaims it. He says the dimension wasn't actually collapsing, but was being sucked into one of the Spot's holes. The material for that hole is indeed the same, but no one listens to him. I don't know why. And that building is being sent to another dimension, which is why only that building and that building alone is the only thing glitching out. The radioactive spider from Dimension 42 was removed from that dimension. Spider-Man never existed there. Isn't that a huge significant canon alteration? How does Dimension 42 still exist? How does Miles' dimension still exist for that matter too? The first Spider-Man died? Miguel replaced someone from another dimension, and that didn't work. But Miles replaced someone from his own dimension, and that did work? Is this a weird code thing? Delete a file, replace it, rename it, the computer keeps functioning as intended? Even Miles accuses this whole canon event prediction to be just a bad robotic algorithm that thinks it knows what has to happen. We never see Miguel trying to fix Miles' dimension. Dozens of Spider-Man coming in to contain a giant black hole like they did for Mumbattan? That seems like something Miles would notice, considering his city is the epicenter for the Collider. They claim Miles can't mess with the canon. They say it's canon for Miles' uncle and dad to die. But then they go and say it's not canon for Miles to be Spider-Man in the first place, so why is it now canon that his family dies? Is it merely the concept of being Spider-Man? Is it a universal rule that all Spider-Man need to lose an uncle and a father? We've already established this isn't the case for every single one of them. Aside from all that, Miguel introduces the Spiderverse to Miles. There's a tree of the universe, and within that universe are spiderwebs all tied together. Miguel says those universes all contain spider people, and the canon events are what hold them together. So is this a Rick and Morty situation? Where Rick takes all the universes where he's the smartest person in that universe and connects them together, and then evil Morty shatters that? Because surely there are universes out there where spider people or that radioactive spider never existed. So theoretically, because it's not woven amongst the Spiderverse, the spider people should have no access to it. But it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The fact that a canon event unravels a dimension, there's a possibility it's merely snapping all ties with the Spiderverse. It could be deleted from existence, or perhaps it's merely inaccessible and existing elsewhere. The sequel's Part 2 title, Beyond the Spiderverse, feels a little like a hint to me. Regardless, we don't know what the truth is yet, but there's something more going on here. As for what this movie might be trying to say, the previous film was adamant about Spider-Man not being able to save everyone, and in a way that still rings true, even in the sequel. Miles has two cakes and wrecks them both. Pavitr is stuck between the choice of saving his girlfriend or her father, and he struggles, saying to himself he can do both. Miles saying he too can do both when it comes to saving his father alongside everyone else. And it will be a shame if they go back on this, but at the same time, while a Spider-Man can't save everyone, a Spider-Man can save more with help. Miles running off by himself to fight not only the Spot, but also the spider people that try to stop him just to protect his family, I think he's not going to be able to do it by himself. But Gwen, who has formed a band, so to say, of all the people, all the lives Miles has changed. They didn't fully support him before, but now they do. Now they will. And I hope Miles, when they come to him, I hope he accepts he can't do both. I hope he accepts even if they can't save everyone, they can at least try. That's what being Spider-Man is all about. Anyway, out of all the other movies coming out this month, Across the Spiderverse is in the highest tier.
Hey, Future Hezu here. I swear, as soon as I type up a review,
new information comes out. Turns out the animators on Across the Spiderverse were abusively overworked with impossible deadlines, 11-hour workdays, nearly 7 days a week. Some of them quit and others had mental breakdowns from burnout. When these allegations came out, the producer, Amy Pascal, responded to this, and she rudely and condescendingly said, "Welcome to making a movie," which I think she was referring to people saying they had to redo shots. And yes, you have to redo things while making a movie, but making people redo things several times over after it's been fully rendered with horrible, unobtainable deadlines? Now that's a waste of time, energy, and money. It comes across as though she's declaring Sony's workspace is in fact extremely unhealthy and you overwork and probably underpay everyone. What's even weirder is that apparently there are 2 different versions of this movie out in theaters right now. Minor animation changes, minor dialogue changes, they don't matter in the grand scheme of things, but it's enough to notice and make people very confused. Why did they release 2 different movies to theaters? I know this is a multiverse movie, and maybe they think this is quirky, but it seems ridiculous to me. Especially knowing these animators were pushed to redo scenes. Did they have to redo scenes even for the frickin' nonsensical second version of the movie? It just seems weird to me. Aside from that, while going through some footage of the movie online to figure out if I missed anything, I actually looked back at the ending scene. And at first, I didn't notice, but now that I have, I can't unsee it. There's a big animation error / retcon here. When Prowler Miles is introduced, his jacket has a triple crown point collar. We even get a shot focusing directly at the back of it. But then a few shots later, the middle crown is completely deleted. It's now very clearly just a 2-crown collar. I mean, personally, he looks better with the 2-crown, but even in the 2-crown shot, he looks wrong. His face is too rounded, and his collar looks like a flat, low-poly plane, like a piece of paper that folds out awkwardly. Did they use, 3 different models for this shot? It seems like they changed his appearance almost last minute. Spiderbyte's pop figure merch is also incorrect. It's based off early concept art and not her final design, but I don't know at what point merch contracts come into play and it's a different situation, but these minor mistakes or last minute changes just kind of paint the image of a hectic production timeline here. This all being said, for the love of animators everywhere, do not release part 2 next year. There's no way in hell. Push it to 2025 or 2026 at least. I don't care how long anyone has to wait as long as it means the people who truly made this masterpiece are taken care of. They need to work at a healthier pace. Anyway, that's about all I had to say. Alright, cue end credits.
Thanks to my patrons as always. You guys are always so patient with me. And I've not been paying attention to my fan art, so sorry. If this is repeated, apologies, but hey, look at all this stuff. Go check these people out. They're very sweet and their art is great. Okay, that's all for now. I assure you I have many other projects coming. I've just been very busy this month. Way too busy. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye-bye!